the Caribbean, we have this culture of honor and shame, right? So if you do good, your parents are like, that's my child. If you
Right.
do bad, you will shame the family.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Davriel J. Peters. I am a licensed marriage family therapist, licensed mental health counselor, clinical traumatologist, and author. Now, during these conversations, we try to provide a safe space to discuss all things related to mental health. These are human experiences, which are subjective to everyone. If at any time you feel triggered by these conversations, feel free to log off and take a step back. If you feel like you are in crisis or would just like to work on things you've heard here today, then you can click the link in my bio and select mental health resources to get assistance with anything that you need. The goal of this series is to allow those who listen to recognize that they are not alone and that we always have the opportunity to grow, heal, and evolve into who we want to be. With that being said, welcome back to The Couch is Yours. Now, in our last session, we had Camila Osman and we discussed perinatal mental health. So be sure to look at that episode if you're a mother, a soon to be mother, or experiencing fertility issues. Now, today, I have a very special guest that I'm excited to introduce to you all. Her name is Miss Jenna Julian, and she is a psychotherapist and an emotional intelligence consultant. And today, we're going to discuss parenting in the Caribbean. So, welcome, Jenna. How are you? What's going on? It's been a while. This has been coming.
I know. So, hi, Gabrielle, everyone who's listening. Oh my gosh, I am really super excited about this topic. I feel like it is so needed and so necessary. And thank you for having me on today. I'm feeling
Yes.
excited. Right. So if you all see the passion coming up and I get a little, a little extra in how it is I am speaking, just know this is just a topic that I love. Absolutely love. And I love what you're doing, Gabrielle. Thank you for creating this space to just educate people on mental health and just the everyday things that we experience that we don't talk about. Like, we know that is needed, especially in the Caribbean.
I'm sure we're gonna have a great conversation. I feel the energy, and I'm like, yes, let's go, let's get into it. Before we get into it, though, what is an emotional intelligence consultant? Because I feel like people may hear that they would have heard psychotherapist, right? But they may hear that and just want to know exactly, okay, what is it that she does, right? So break that down for us a little bit, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, emotional intelligence is pretty much what we do in therapy, right? We help people to become aware of themselves, their emotions, their thoughts, their behaviors, which is self awareness, right? How to manage themselves and also how to show up effectively in relationships, right? So, it's really just being attuned to what's happening inwardly and also outwardly. And I believe that if it is we have more emotional literacy happening, we would make better choices. We when it pertains to relationships, the friendships we keep, how we respond to situations. That's basically what I do. I go around just helping people to become more aware of themselves and to build healthy relationship with their emotions because our emotions are not bad, right? They are there for a reason. They give us information and we just need to know how to use that information in an informed way to show up healthily, especially in our relationships. So, yeah, so that's what I do. It's just helping people become aware.
Definitely needed in our society today, right? Oh, yes. What exactly would you say got you interested into this field in the first place?
Boy, well, that's a story. Let's
We're
say it
here for
that
all the stories. The couch is yours.
you. Let's say it started with a broken heart, right? When my engagement ended 5 months before my wedding day, right?
Wow.
This was precisely a decade ago. And back then, therapy and mental health and all these spaces that we have was not trending, it was not a buzzword. And I was navigating all of these big emotions and I did not know what to do with them. So, of course, I dealt with it in a very unhealthy way, the suppressing, the, distracting and using people as crutches and all these things to just self-soothe. And I realized that, wait a minute, I am sabotaging myself, so I needed a way forward. So, girl, it wasn't accessible in that time. So I developed a framework for myself. And I'll tell you, I went to a defensive driving course. And of course, the man is teaching us about, driving. And he got to the point where he was talking about how to use your front mirrors and your rearview mirror. And he was talking about this reflect, reframe, refocus. And me with my broken heart is just like, that's something that I think I could use to help me out of this space that I'm in. So I went home and I developed this process. I'm like, okay, I'm going to reflect. I'm going to look back. I'm not going to avoid, you know, all the emotions and everything that happened. And then I'm going to reframe the situation. This is a lesson. It wasn't all bad. I didn't waste time. They were good. It wasn't, only horrible things that came out of this. And the refocusing part is like, okay, Jenna, where do you want to go from here? You're in a new journey. I really was feeling lost. I didn't know who I was because my identity was so wrapped up at that time in the relationship that I was in and also in my family background, right? And just for context, I'm a pastor's kid. Okay, so
Oh,
so yeah,
I instantly went, oh,
right, the tea just got real hot, right?
yeah.
So I didn't know who I was. And up until that time, I was being everything that everyone wanted me to be. And I was on a journey of self discovery. So a lot of my refocusing was on finding me, loving me, because at that season, I didn't really love myself. I didn't know how to manage my emotions well, which also contributed to, part of the downfall of that relationship. So after finding my way and becoming resilient and bouncing back, I was like, you know what? I want to create this space for other people. And alongside that, I also was battling some family challenges and not knowing how to navigate that, not feeling like I have a voice well, I was in my mid 20s, but early 20s, sorry. But in the Caribbean, as long as you're in your parents'
We
house,
gonna get into that.
you're a child, okay?
You are a
And
child.
so yeah, so I felt really stifled and just trying to navigate all the things. So that pushed me into pursuing this. And then my adolescence, at that time, I was a youth leader, and my young ones will come to me about family challenges, and I would give them all of these helpful advice. They would go home and try to implement it, but they would get shut down. And I realized that, wait a minute, the entire system needs to change and they need help. So I felt helpless. So I'm like, let me do something to not just help myself, but to help others and to help families to be more resilient and to be more open, so that they can function more healthily. And that's when I resigned my job and I was like, deuces. And I went to the US to pursue my master's in marriage and family therapy. And here we are.
That's a exhale there for a second, because what an inspirational story and life that you've lived, in the sense of it started with heartbreak, right? And for a lot of people, that could have been the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Close. Book close, that's it. But here it was a crossroads for you. It was the turning of a corner. It was the opening of a fresh new chapter, a new act. And you took that pain and you were able to use that pain in a way where now you're able to help others. So you didn't just help yourself. And yes, it may have taken time. We all have a process, right? And I'm sure you tell your clients that too. Like, we all have to go through our process. And sometimes, most times, it's not pretty,
Mm-hmm.
but you were still able to navigate it in a way where now you are not just using what you've learned selfishly, but you're using it for your greater community, and that is really admirable. Wow, like the counselor in me is like itching to turn this whole topic into relationship stuff, but we will stay.
Girl.
That'll be a conversation for
Yeah.
another
Oh, true.
time. We'll stay on
Right.
parenting for now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, thank you so much for sharing that with
Yeah.
us, and definitely I'm sure both the audience and I feel like we are a lot more connected to you now from learning a bit about your background. Now, getting into the topic at hand, parenting in the Caribbean. I wanted to just start by what I think is really important to our society and our culture, which is values. What
Mm.
would you say are some of the core values that significantly influence parenting in the Caribbean?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful place to start because I think it sets the tone for why we have a specific way that we parent in the Caribbean. So the first thing that pops into my mind is respect. Respect, 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 right?
RESPECT.
Exactly, right? I think that is very, very big in our culture. And honestly, like respect looks differently because persons would say it is a big thing in the US and Canada and the UK, etc. Right? But when it is we look at Caribbean parenting, is more respect like I am the parent, you are the child, you don't have much of a say. What I say goes. If you do push back or say something, you are seen as disrespectful. Right. So I do think that, Caribbean parents are very big on respect. Even if you're walking on the street and somebody is not your auntie, referring to that person as Auntie Susan, Uncle Matthew, like don't dare call someone by their first name. That is
Oh
diabolical.
my
All
gosh,
right.
as you said that, was that a culture shock for you in the US? Because, like, my lecturers, I would always refer to them Miss, Mr., Doctor, whoever, last name, right? And they
Right.
would be like, no, 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 call me by my first name, call me Susan. And I am feeling so uncomfortable because exactly what you're saying, it's been hammered into us. This person is older than you, or they're in some role of seniority. You cannot dare to call them by their first name.
Yeah, so interestingly, I actually did not pay attention to that shift. I think I just fell right into it. Like, but I know actually my professors, we call them Dr. So and so. So it wasn't just like, oh, Brittany or Gladwin, like it was Dr. So and so. So maybe that's why I didn't
You didn't
realize.
observe it too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I ever called any of my professors by their first name, you
Well,
know.
it would have been those that probably didn't yet achieve their doctorate, right? If they were just Miss, Mister, they would have been like, oh, just call me, and mm,
Yeah, so for like the older ones who didn't have that title, yeah, you just call them by their first name and it was absolutely fine. Yeah,
wild.
but respect is a big deal in parenting. In terms of other values, I definitely think religion. I think faith and religion
Mm,
very, very big in our culture and it plays a significant role in, just helping set that moral compass, what's right from what's wrong.
right.
So I see a lot of Caribbean families having that foundational, like we are of a specific faith. And, in the Caribbean, for those who don't know, we do have not just Christianity and Catholicism, we have, Hindus, we have Muslims, we are very, what they call that, not intercultural, interreligious.
We'll roll with that.
Right. So yeah, so we do make space for all of those religions as
Mhm.
well. So I think that is a big deal. Discipline is very, very big core value. What's the common phrase? Don't spare the rod and spoil the
Holy
child,
child.
which comes from spirituality and
Yeah.
well, right? So yeah, so discipline is big and it looks a little different in the sense that, we come from a culture that where parents love to beat, right? In the US, that is a no-no. But here in the Caribbean, yeah, discipline is very, very big, making sure that, you ensure that your children have manners or, they are going back to respect as well. And I think just this entire culture, maybe I would say reputation for this one, because
Mm,
in the Caribbean, we have this culture of honor and shame, right? So if you do good, your parents are like, that's my child. If you
right.
do bad, you will shame the family, right? Don't embarrass the family. So we come from it's a big culture of shame and honor and shame. So I think reputation is a big deal. Like I think parents with that mindset that, oh my gosh, what people would say about us if they know this, or if it is you become this, this is what people would think.
Right.
So
They
yes,
see
I
the
think
child as an extension of themselves,
exactly.
right?
That's a
So
great
it's
thing.
not that the child, oh, you're shaming yourself. No, no, no. You're shaming me.
The
And you're
family.
shaming the family, right? So there's no individualism for that child to say that the shame will stay on that child.
No,
But
no,
you are
they
an
carry.
extension and a
Yeah.
reflection of us and the family that you come from.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with honor. So if you
Right.
do well,
Right. It's
our
not your no boo boo. It's not your win. It's our win.
it's our win and it's our loss. So I think families, Caribbean families are kind of enmeshed in that sense. And family name is very, very important.
Mm,
And I think for me, I felt the brunt of it being growing up as a pastor's kid, where everything, it wasn't just, oh, Jenna is going through something. It's the pastor's daughter. So yeah, so I think that those are some key values I would say that governs Caribbean parenting. Well, what do you think?
all of those topics that you highlighted there, the respect aspect, I'm wondering how does it get warped into guilt and into shame? Because it's almost like to gain that respect, we use guilt and shame as
Yeah.
a manipulation tactic, as a manipulation tool to get that respect. And then is it even really respect that we're acquiring, or is it fair? And I think that that's what a lot of parents misunderstand. And again, it's because of how they were raised, right? It's passed down. But at the end of the day, does your child really respect you? Or do they fear you? And there may be some parents that may actually be like, yeah, they better fear me, right? But
Yeah.
then what kind of relationship are you cultivating? Is it a relationship where the child feels safe emotionally, mentally, physically, that when something happens, you would be the first person they turn to? Or is it a relationship where you're going to be so harsh and shredding of any sense of who they are that you're the last person that even crosses their mind when
Mm,
something is wrong? And then guess what? They are left isolated and they probably turn to even worse company, people with worse intentions. Because I sincerely would like to believe parents have the best of intentions, right?
yes.
We know they're outliers. We're not talking about them, right? We're talking about parents who actually care about their kids
Mm,
and they have the best intentions. But sometimes, there's a saying, what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions,
yeah.
right? So you have great intentions, but your methods may not be achieving the goal and the outcome that you would like to achieve.
Yeah. And I love that you preface this conversation with that because again, most parents, healthy parenting, they don't intend on hurting or harming their child.
Yeah.
But also that doesn't mean that hurt or harm is not caused, right? And I think I'll bring that into the question about, how does that desire for respect get warped into like guilt and shame? Because as I said earlier, respect is often kind of defined as comply without questioning. So when children try to assert themselves or speak up for themselves, they are labeled as disrespected. And then you see parents say, after all that I've done for you,
Ooh,
that you would say,
I
and
feel
that
that. I feel that in my whole chest.
girl,
I'm
right?
being triggered. I am
Yes,
being triggered.
after all that I have done for you. So it's almost as though it's
Yes.
me speaking up about my how I am feeling hurt or
Right.
how you are harming me in this process cancels off everything that you have done for me. That's the guilt.
Right.
right? And
Right.
then the parent's mind is like, that's disrespect. The fact that
Mm,
you are speaking up, right?
yes.
Or they may say, as I said earlier, you're embarrassing the family, or you will just bring shame to the family. That's shame, right? Because what they're living and they're making mistakes and just trying to figure life out. So I think that's how that desire for respect gets convoluted and distorted with guilt and shame, right?
I
So
love how you broke that out. I love
yeah.
how you broke it down because it also, as you were speaking, what popped in my mind was this is exactly why
Hmm.
we in our society find it so difficult to become in tune with our emotions
Yes.
because we've been taught to deny them from a very young age. What you crying for? You want me to give you something to cry for? That means shut it down, shut it down. There's no actual investigation. Is something actually going on here? Is there a real issue? Right? Like there's no this feeling that you're feeling, let me teach you how to regulate it in a healthy way. It's just cancel it. Cancel. We've been taught to suppress as a
Hmm.
way of coping, and that's just survival. It's not actual living. So as you were speaking, that came to mind. That self denial, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we have, the kids or children, they comply outwardly, but they suppress their
Mhm.
emotions and their individuality. And that's why we're seeing a lot of self-harming happening with our adolescents. Do you work with adolescents or only
Yes.
adults? Okay. Right. So that's like a big thing now because they don't have that safe space, as you shared, to express how they feel. So they are looking for some method to find relief. And unfortunately,
Mhm.
they are choosing the unhealthy ones because now
Yes.
it's a trend. It's an awful trend that is circulating around our younger generation. So yeah, it creates a cycle where, okay, let me don't talk about my emotions. My emotions are not valid. I shouldn't feel this way. They
Mhm.
feel bad for feeling, for having emotions. And then we see that trickling into their adulthood and affecting their relationships.
Well,
So yeah.
there is always an impact.
Always.
And you even mentioned a bit about religion
Hmm.
because in our Caribbean culture, we know religion is another like foundational part of who
Yeah.
we are and our identity, right?
Hmm.
Like you listed, especially in Trinidad specifically, we have such a complex melting pot of so many different types of religions, but all of them have that common theme, which is keep the child in line,
Yeah.
right? It becomes less about getting them to really understand, really be a part about with the religion or the belief system, and more about just keeping them in line. And it makes me wonder, isn't this the same thing that when colonialism was sharing the gospel, right? Not that anything is wrong with the gospel. I am a Christian and I'm a proud one, okay? But the way it's disseminated, that is what I'm wondering. Where it's this heavy-handed rules, regulations, do this, do that, right? If you don't, I'll bust your skin. Like, isn't that essentially what it was given to us as a tool for to keep the slaves in line, to keep them orderly, to keep them submissive, and to in essence deny themselves. And I wonder if we are following that same trend rather than an open expression of this is what we believe and actually showing that belief. So I wonder, my question to you is there a healthy way that parents, because of course, if you strongly believe your faith, you would want to share it with your children. That's one of the number one things you would want. So I wonder if there's a healthy way that we can do that, that does not deny who they are, does not silence who they are, does not shove them into a box, right? So what is your opinion on
Girl, I got a lot to say about that.
that?
Right? So, as you're talking, what a thought that triggered is that that's generational trauma, right?
I'm sorry. It's, I can't help it.
No, it's generational trauma, and it's the trauma of fear and control, right?
Yes.
And
Woo!
yes, as I would have said, I grew up as a pastor's kid, so this is why I can speak a lot into this topic of healthy versus unhealthy, right? And yes, a lot of rule, it was very rigid. And to me, I didn't realize this until I left Trinidad and was in the US. I didn't realize how much God was presented to me, just not necessarily by my parents, but just by the church community as this moral monster with this big stick
Wow.
over your head. And if you
Moral
do,
monster.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And you know, when I realized that, when one of my professors, I was his teaching assistant, and he wrote a book, and the book was entitled God is Not a Moral Monster. And I had to proofread his book for him. And
Mm,
in the pages of that book, I found myself. I found that this is literally the view of God that I have. That if I mess up, if I make a mistake, if I, just shift to the left a little bit or shift to the right a little bit, it's like this great big sin and there is no hope for me, right? And that brought a lot of fear into my relationship with God. And I'm not talking about the holy reverential fear, I'm talking about anxiety fear, right? The thing that we are helping people, overcome. No. So yeah, that is the unhealthy approach. And what I had to do is lean into relationship with God. So I think the healthy version looks like helping your child um find that relationship with God and understand that they can talk to God about everything. Whatever they are struggling with, maybe they are struggling in believing Him. Create space for expression. Create space for them to be honest about how they feel, what they're thinking, because in that space, God is going to intervene and He is going to bring that clarity that they are looking for. So I do think, like, yes, it's important for parents to expose their children to religion and, all these things, but we also have to leave room for them to ask their questions because God is not a moral monster. He is loving, He is kind, He is gracious, and guess what? He could handle all of their questions. We are the ones who do not have the answers, and I think that's when adults feel threatened when they cannot respond to the questions and concerns that the younger ones may have. They feel threatened by that. But listen, God is not. He's not threatened. So I do think it's important to not use fear. I think that was used a lot when I was growing up. Like, if you don't do this, if you don't pay your tithes, you wouldn't have money. And okay, maybe, there is some element of truth with, the impact of not staying in God's guidelines. And I have experienced that when I went astray, there were
facts.
consequences. There are
But you
consequences.
want to have that relationship out of love, not out
Exactly, not
of
out of fear
fear.
and not out of control. And I think that is what has been passed down from generation to generation, fear and control, from slavery and colonialism to now. That is what has been passed down.
Wow.
So that is the trauma that we need to now break. Where, no, I don't want to fear you into loving God. I want to help you to see His beauty and His goodness and His kindness. And I want you to find that relationship on your own. So that's how I had to break free from that fear and seeing God like this moral monster.
As we are as we are talking about this topic, religion, I am realizing that parents really need to see that they themselves are the reflection of their belief system.
Mm-hmm.
So your child will either want what you have or they will not want what you have. And that is based off of how you portray it.
Yeah.
So if, like,
Absolutely.
literally, that God, whoever it is, mine is the Lord Savior Jesus Christ. If
Right.
you claim to love Jesus Christ, but you are always coming from a place of fear, always coming from a place of anxiety, that is who they will get to know Jesus Christ to be. And that's not who he is. So
Right.
you are portraying something totally different, and they will not want what you have. And guess what? The more you try to force them, force feed them, they're going to go the complete opposite direction. The complete opposite direction. They're going to rebel away from it. So you're actually doing the opposite of, again, what you intend. Your intention is, this is important. I want them to have a relationship with my faith, with my belief, with my God. But the way I'm going about it is causing division, it's causing separation, it's going the complete opposite direction.
It's very counterproductive. And you know what's interesting? It's interesting how dependent on your cultural background, because a lot of our beliefs come from culture, come from family, and all these things. That's how we see God. Because I'm going to use the example of, so I have experienced the rigid side of Christianity in the Caribbean, where it was very condemning and not a lot of grace, even though we're supposed to have a lot of grace, versus, in the US, where there was a lot of love, right? No matter who you are, which is beautiful. But then there was also a lack of reverence for righteousness. So
Mm.
in some ways it's kind of like anything goes. And
Uh-oh.
I remember being where I'm just like, God, where is the middle?
Right, right.
Because it's from one extreme
To the
to the
next.
next. But I
Where's the
realized
balance?
our cultural lens definitely impacts how we view God and how we pass that on to our kids,
Mm,
and our children. So yeah, so our parents are passing on what was passed down to them, you know,
definitely.
and at some point this is why we're having this conversation, because they may not realize that they are passing down fear and control, right? And we want to break that. We want our children to see God as a loving father. Yes, there is the wrathful side of him, right? And again, yes, there are consequences for your behavior, but at the same time, like, who wants to be in a relationship with someone that will hit them on their head if they make a mistake? Not me. So why are we presenting that version of God,
Right.
to our
Yeah.
kids? But I think culture just plays, and our belief system plays a major, major role in how we view our faith and how we pass it on to others.
We started this conversation, and some may say, trashing parents in the Caribbean, which is not the aim of this conversation at all.
Absolutely not.
Okay. But that being said, I think it's important for us to also highlight some strengths.
Yes.
So, what would you say are some unique strengths that you've observed in families within the Caribbean region?
Yeah, I think faith is one of them. As I said, like,
Definitely.
even though it felt really rigid, that kept me in line. Like, because of that, Christ is always my default. No matter how far I go and stray, I would always come back to this place. So I think, enforcing that religion, and I hear people who may not be necessarily practicing their faith, but because they come from that family of faith, that's what they lean into in times of trouble. So I think that's a great strength. I also do think that Caribbean families are very resilient in adversity. So you're not depressed, go and read your Bible. Or as you said, you want something to cry for, all of that, even though it felt like, oh my gosh, like you are denying my reality. It did make us tough, Gabrielle,
It did.
right? It
It
did
really did.
strengthen us, it strengthened our mind. It taught us how to fight and press through, right? And when it is we look at, in comparison to other cultures that were more patted on their back, they tend to be a lot more fragile. We in the Caribbean, our parents, they are fighters. They are fighters. They know how to press through. Some of them experience a lot of poverty. Some of them are
Mhm.
single parents and they are navigating. I mean, that is beautiful. And then their kids are growing up seeing them, seeing their strength, right? Seeing them still showing up even when things are hard. And guess what? They are now going to model that in their life.
Fact, the
I do
same
think,
way that trauma can be passed on, resilience can also be passed on. And that is the
so,
message that we have for parents today.
yeah,
Yes, you wouldn't get everything right, We're human. We won't. So
We're
we want
okay.
to highlight it and bring it to your awareness. But
Yeah.
the whole point of these discussions is, how do I now course correct? How do I pass on that resilience, that strength, that faith still, but in a more balanced way, right? So I love that. As you spoke about the strength, you actually brought up some of the stressors. So what are some common stressors that affect persons in the Caribbean?
Yeah, I think definitely.
Caribbean families
Yeah.
specifically, yeah.
I think economic pressures, it's a big deal. Like as we know, since COVID, and it has been happening before COVID, but cost of living has increased and salaries have not, right? So I do think that a lot of families experience a lot of economic pressures, and that impacts their parenting style. Because if you are financially stressed, which is the worst type of stress to have, well, one of the worst, right? Um, guess what? That frustration, that anger is going to come out in how you treat people, how you speak to your children. It's not so much that you want to, it's kind of like displaced anger or displaced frustration. They are coming to you to ask for food and putting food on the table. You don't mean to do that, but you have so much stress going on and it's snowballing. And then that's how it trickles down. And I also think we see a lot of this, a lot of single parents, especially single mothers, mostly single mothers, right? That is also very, very stressful. I've been seeing a lot of videos popping up on like TikTok and Instagram where single parents, one single mother, she was like, listen, it just took me to be a single mother for one to know that I never ever want to do this again because you do not get a break. Like you literally, someone said this to me recently where, the only like she's just surviving for her kids even when she doesn't want to survive. Now that could be triggering because it's like, are you having, suicidal thoughts? But that wasn't the nature of the conversation. She was just expressing like it is hard being a single mother of three children, and you are literally just going because you're going for your kids, right? And that in itself could also impact the way that you relate to your kids, the space that you create for your kids as well. Sometimes you see where the kids probably may resemble their father, and because of that strained relationship that the mom had with the child's father, every time that mother sees that child or behavioral patterns or anything that emulates that, it triggers her. And guess what? She's reacting not towards the child, but towards the pain that she experienced. So I do think that, that in itself also too impacts parenting. And this is why healing is so important. Because as you said earlier, like we're not human, life is going to happen, right? We're going to go into situations not expecting a horrible outcome, but it's going to come nonetheless. And how we respond to life, how we respond to those adversities is what is going to determine how we show up as parents, how we show up for ourselves, and how we show up in our other relationships. So those are two that comes to mind. And I also do think that parents experience academic pressures, especially if their child has like a learning disability and we don't have systems and
Yeah.
resources.
Support.
That is frustrating, right? So it is frustrating to parent a child who have a disability, and even more frustrating when you do not have support, as you said, or resources to help the child to get where they need to be. So there are so many pressures our parents are facing on a day-to-day, health challenges as well. That's also a major thing. It's like if you get some sort of news that you are having some sort of health challenges and you still have to navigate showing up for work, providing for your family, helping kids with the homework, like it is endless. It is really, really endless. So I salute parents, and parenting does not come with a manual.
Boy.
So
There
and
are many books, but still,
many, but it doesn't
still,
come with a
yeah.
manual. And then every child is so
Child.
different.
Oh my gosh. If every child was born with their individualized book, that'd be something else.
Right?
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
child is so different. So how you raise the first one, you have to take a totally different approach when it is you're raising the second one. Having to flex and meet the needs of the different needs, I should say, of all of the children, that takes a lot. I cannot even begin to imagine. There are a lot of pressures that our parents are facing and navigating while still trying to be the best parent that they can be. And I want to say to the parents listening, like, parenting is not about perfection.
Mm.
Your child does not need a perfect parent. They just need a present parent. They just need you to be there with them, right? To help
When
them,
you say present, not just physically
not
present.
just physically, especially, no, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as we were saying, so it's not just about physical parents. Because guess what? We have parents who are there physically, but they are not there emotionally. And it still delays the proper development of a child. Right? So it's not just about providing the basic, if we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, clothing, shelter. No, it's providing that love and belongingness and making sure, their esteem needs are met and they get that love and that support so that they can be that actualized version of themselves. So it takes a lot into rearing a healthy child, right? But it's not easy. It's not easy. So your child just really needs you to be present with them.
I think you did a great job of laying out the different stresses, pressures that not just Caribbean parents, but I think parents on a whole
Parents, yeah.
face on a day to day basis,
Mm-hmm.
especially when raising one or more children. And like you said, even children with neurodivergence issues, it can be really, really hectic and really challenging. And I know someone listening to this, whether they are a new parent or they would have the desire to become a parent, or even parents themselves may be like, whoa, this feels like a lot. It feels like we have to do a lot. But research has actually shown that if a parent could just be present with their child, like we said, physically, emotionally, mentally, like undivided attention for just
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes a day, just 15 minutes. Think you have the whole 24 hours, you're working for 8 of those hours, just 15 minutes a day. Put away the tablet, take off the TV, face your child for 15 minutes a day. That in itself is enough for your child to feel seen, for your child to feel loved, for your child to feel connected to it, to have that bond, to have and develop that secure attachment.
Yes.
15 minutes. 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a whole hour. It doesn't have to be a whole half an hour. Just 15 minutes. And okay, one day you were really busy, you missed your 15 minutes yesterday, make up for it the next day. 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes. So that's something I would also encourage parents to do. And it doesn't matter the age of your child. You may have teenagers. It doesn't matter. They may be toddlers. Wherever they are, it doesn't matter. You meet them where they are and just spend that 15 minutes. But in those 15 minutes, it's not about you grilling them. It's
Mm.
not about you telling them what they didn't do. They didn't clean their room. They still have this chore to do. No, that 15 minutes is honestly for you to just listen, to be a safe space, for them to get accustomed to turning to you.
I love
That's
that.
what that 15 minutes is for. So it's actually a challenge, parents, because I'm actually challenging you to use these and not this. We have two of these and one of this, right? So it's a challenge to be silent in those 15 minutes and just give them the floor. Just hear how they feel. How was their day? Who are your friends in school? What excited you today? What was challenging for you today? And when it was challenging, what did you do about it? Like just give them the floor. 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that is what more of our Caribbean parenting needs, that open space. And again, we didn't grow up with that. So this is probably going to be a big shift and it's going to feel uncomfortable because, again, a parent's intent is always to protect their child.
Of course.
They're never trying to, well, most healthy parents, they're never trying to hurt or harm their child, as you said earlier. And naturally they want to give advice and they want to, jump to solutions. But something I use with my parents and their teens is listen or fix it challenge. So when your teenager comes to you right? Naturally, you want to just solve all of their problems, but ask them, do you want me to listen or fix it? Because sometimes they just want you to listen. They just want to talk about this boy and and this girl and what the friends say and how she's bad talking this one and how she's feeling. And they don't want you to deny that experience. They just want you to listen and just be like, really, girl? Oh my God, how dare she does something like that, right?
Validate. I am upset,
Yes,
mom.
validate those feelings. And then there are times when they want you to fix it. They want you to intervene and be like, okay, mom, what should I do in this moment? And I do think something that we need to work on a lot more is helping our children to think critically,
Correct. If we
right?
solve it for them, they won't develop that
But
skill.
that's not rearing a resilient child.
It's rearing a dependent child.
Exactly. And
And that then turns into a dependent
exactly. Say it louder.
adult.
Right? Yeah, and that's what, God forbid, if something happens, you want to know that, you have trained your child how to fall and get back up, how to make mistakes and move forward. And, John Maxwell has this book called Fail Forward, and it's all about, making mistakes, but make sure you're failing forward and you're moving forward with your failures. So you cannot solve all of their problems. You cannot shield them from every single thing by controlling them or trapping them or putting them in a box. But the best thing that you can do for your child is one, teach them how to identify and recognize their emotions, how to soothe those emotions, and how to bounce back when life just doesn't go their way, because life is not going to go their way. And they need to learn that. Like I was telling my parents literally just a few days ago, I was like, y'all did not prepare me well enough for adulthood. You all took such good care of me. You all sheltered me. You all took so many blows for me that now as an adult and life is coming, I'm like, whoa, I did not subscribe to this. Like, where did all of this come from?
Adulthood is very ghetto.
It's
It's the
ghetto.
most ghetto hood. To be honest, okay, adulthood is ghetto, but to be honest, I feel parenthood is even more ghetto.
Oh my gosh, it's ghetto
No,
art.
parenthood is hard. And that's why we're having this conversation
Yeah.
because we recognize it is hard. Like, I am never going to just be like, parenthood is easy. With all the degrees that we have, even between the two of us, we know parenting is not
It
easy.
is not
Yeah.
easy. It is not.
But it's also, I think, the greatest opportunity we
Yeah.
have, right? To be able to really mold a child, to be able to
Hmm.
then guide a child, because the rules change. And that's where I think a lot of parents get issues. They run into issues, right? They want to keep molding. They want to keep molding. But it's like, no, in the beginning, you have to mold, then you have to guide. Then,
Yes.
to be honest, you kind of have to let them go on their own. The rules change as that child develops.
I
And so,
love that you said that. And that is so true because you start off walking in front of them when they are vulnerable and they don't know, and then you walk beside them. And then sometimes you have to move from beside and you walk behind.
behind,
Don't leave them. I want to say this to parents, your children,
oh,
no matter how
please,
big they are, how grown they are, they need you. But as you said, Gabrielle, the rules change. So influence, you want to make sure that you ensure that you remain influential in your child's life, right? When my adolescents come to me, whether from church or whatever the case is, it's because I have created this space where I remain influential. I don't criticize them. I will call them out on their stuff, but
correct.
respectfully and
Yeah.
lovingly,
You
right?
could
So
challenge their thinking, you could challenge
exactly.
them, but it doesn't mean belittle them.
No, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. And I think that's probably the balance maybe parents have to learn. And I understand that it's a tricky balance. Like, how do I call you out but not belittle you? Like, what does that look like? Because again, it's not this conversation is not a matter of leaving your children to do whatever they want or wanting to overcorrect based on how you are parented to the point where you go to the other extreme. No, your children, guess what? They don't have their full brains until they're 20, 25, maybe sometimes even 27, right? So they still need your involvement in their life. It just looks differently. And I love to use open ended questions. Get them thinking, get them involved in solving their own problems, and you just guide them. You just guide them through how to think about the situation and how to make informed decisions about their life. So your kids need you, and give yourself grace as a parent, give them grace as well. And I always tell my adolescent they also need to give their parents grace
Correct.
because
Because they're
parents
human as well. Your
are
parents
human.
are not invincible and they will make mistakes, right? And both sides need to be accountable for those mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Today's episode is sponsored by EVOLVINU Counseling and Family Services, which provides quality, affordable therapy to clients throughout the Caribbean and Florida. Now let's get back to the couch.
Oh
We've
my gosh.
spoken a lot about how the stresses that parents endure in the
Mhm.
family. But now I want to actually highlight some of the stresses that in turn the children endure. So you mentioned single parent households, right? And that has become the norm now in our society. But usually the result of that puts an additional strain on the eldest child. That eldest child then, right, becomes parentified. They are
Mhm.
now the new parent in the household. So how does that parentification, how does that impact their development?
Yeah, and just to give, understanding for those of you who may be hearing parentification for the first time, it just simply means, a child who had to take on adult responsibilities or parent responsibilities at a very young age, right? That's what parentification is. And basically, this child had to grow up really, really fast, right? So they would have lost their childhood. They would have lost the ability to explore themselves and to have fun, and they would have now had to tap into this realm of caring for the needs of others and making sure that everything is in place, right? And what I see a lot with clients that were parentified is this element of perfectionism, like
My
feel like they always have to have it right, have things together, right?
correct, correct.
And coupled with that is the people pleasing, right?
People
So,
pleasing slash over responsibility.
yes, and over functioning, and they feel like they have to do the most. And sometimes this can feel a lot in adult relationships because what it looks like if you're a female and you are parentified, you are in a romantic relationship with someone, but you are treating the other person like they're your son or they are your child. And that could be very strenuous and uncomfortable because no, you're not that person's mother. But because for such a long time, this child would have had to function in the role of caring for others. Good intentions again is to continue that care because that's how they are conditioned to behave and to show up. But sometimes it ends up being a lot and it causes challenges um, in their relationships. And then we also have that lack of ability to form boundaries in their adult relationships, right? So they become, because they have grown um, to function as parents from such a young age, they become so enmeshed in their relationships and they become over involved in all the details because they become fixers. I want to fix this. I want to solve this. Right. Because that's what parents are typically seen to, how they are seen to function as fixers, as those who know everything, but the reality is that they don't. Right. But imagine having extended years functioning like that. That's how they show up. And then you see them either becoming emotionally disconnected from their own needs, or they are super super enmeshed because they are, by the time they reach adulthood, they are absolutely burnt out because they
Burnt
have
to
been
a crisp.
doing, yes, they have been doing this since like what, 10, 11, 12, some of them even
Some even younger. Yeah.
yeah. So they deny space to look after themselves, and that cause disconnection from their emotions. And guess what? That's how we have persons showing up as avoidance in relationships, like they're physically there but emotionally they do not have the capacity, right? Or they
It
become so
costs
enmeshed,
so much. Yeah.
yeah, that now they become anxious attachers
Yes.
in their relationships. So those are the insecure attachment styles that can come out of someone who has been parentified.
Yeah. I think you laid that out really well, and you broke it down in a very digestible way. And I want to further just highlight exactly what happens to that child, right? So that child, again, as Jenna would have highlighted, children's brains are not fully developed until they're like mid 20s, right? So this child who is sometimes 6 years old, sometimes 10, 11, their brain is not fully developed yet. Their brain is impulsive. Their brain is still egocentric, meaning they can't fully see outside of themselves. And now they are told that they have all of these responsibilities. You have to understand. And there's a difference between just, okay, an elder sibling, yes, okay, you have to, lead a little by example and whatever. And there's a difference between that and no, this is your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
This child, this younger sibling is your responsibility. Because as a child with that underdeveloped brain, what they do is they absorb that. This is literally their child. They don't know how to differentiate and say, no, this is just my baby sister. I mean, they'll say baby sister, right? But I'm trying to break down what happens in the mind. They literally take on this responsibility as their own. And so they really then step out and behave as though this is their child, this is their responsibility. They cannot play, they cannot do anything fun because they have to assume what in their mind an adult role looks like, which
Yeah.
is furthest from what it actually is. It's not the truth, but because they can't make that differentiation, they absorb it completely in that way. And so that's why parents really have to be careful with the amount of responsibilities that you put on a eldest child because they are still children.
Mm-hmm.
Their siblings are not their children. They're your children.
Yeah.
And so it's not their responsibility to take care and meet all the needs of their siblings. That's mom and dad's responsibility. It's not the child's responsibility, even as the eldest sibling.
That's so good.
Yeah. So that's one.
I have nothing to add there because that was so.
That's one. That was the single parent outcome, right? But still with that, with the same single parent. So we spoke about the eldest child, but we also have just the impact of separation and divorce. And I
Mhm.
wanted to highlight that and the impact that that process has on children in the household. What have you seen with households where there are separation or divorce? What have you seen?
Yeah, that's a big one, and it's vast, right? Because I think every child, again, they have a different type of relationship with emotions dependent on how it would have been presented and modeled to them. But I think across the board, what happens is that sense of instability, right? Because it's like you come into the world and you're seeing mom and you're seeing dad, and we're one big happy family. And then one day comes and mom is home, dad is not around. And mom and dad, they carry different presents, right? So women, they are more maternal and more nurturing and caring, and men, they care differently. They bring that masculine energy, that sense of protection and provision, right? And what I have seen, and I'm thinking specifically about a family that I was working with in New York, when the dad left, the youngest child, he started to present behavioral challenges. Like he would act out in school and he would just become uncontrollable and just have these tantrums that weren't there previously. And what was happening is that dad was coming and going and coming and going. And every time dad come, the child would get excited because we were a family again. And then dad will leave. And it was throwing the child off emotionally and mentally. Right. So I think what happens with children is that they lose that sense of stability. There's also a bit of loss of identity because they're still trying to figure themselves out and who they are, and part of that was involved the entire family system. So now, without dad or mom being, together in the picture, it's like, who am I? What does my family look like? Then there is the element of when it is they're seeing their friends and their entire family together, there is that sense of confusion of what is my family like in comparison to this other family, right? Then some of the kids may internalize guilt. They may feel like, was this my fault? Because remember, as we indicated, they don't have the fullness of their brain, so they don't understand everything in its fullest capacity because, they don't have all of their executive functional skills just yet. So they may feel responsible, for the separation. And then they end up having go through this divided loyalty between mom and dad, right? Which adds to the emotional confusion. And this could really impact how a child see themselves and how they position themselves in the world. And then we have society heavily promoting that a healthy family involves mom and dad. No, don't get me wrong, I believe that is God's ideal structure for family life. However, in some instances, we have both mom and dad, and the
It's
environment is
not
not
healthy.
unhealthy. And I was only thought to think about that when I sat in I think it was a seminar on diversity and equity and inclusion, and we were talking about stigmas. And one of the women, she said, one of the stigmas is that a single parent family is a broken family, right? That's one of the stigmas that she wanted to be eroded. And I was like, for real, right? Because single parenting could actually be healthier than a two-parent household, So because as I said, because society have this idea that, oh, if your mom and your dad is not together, then you're from a broken home, right? That impacts how they see themselves and how they develop their identity in the world. And coupled with the separation, there's a lot of anxiety. There's the sadness that, if prolonged, can turn into depression. And as I alluded to, there's the acting out, because when children, if we don't have space for them to talk about how does this separation or divorce impact you, which, by the way, a lot of parents, again, out of this sense of protecting their child, they try to refrain from bringing up the conversation about divorce. And I want to say this to parents: your child is more resilient than you know, right? Yes, they will be impacted. Yes, they will feel sad, but children know how to bounce back. Like, children can have an argument today, and then in a few minutes, actually, they're best friends again. Whereas adults, we holding on to that grudge for years,
They
right?
bounce back way quicker than adults. Correct.
Exactly. And I think that's why, the Bible talks about being childlike, because there is this level of innocence and this ability to shrug things off easily and, move forward from it. Right. So I know parents want to shield them, but when going through a divorce or separation, have the conversation in an age appropriate way. When I'm not saying tell them all the dirty laundry about why the divorce is happening, right? There are some things that you should not include until they're at an age that they can fully understand it. But you want to create that space for them to express, because if they can't express it in words, they're going to express it in behaviors. And then we're going to say, like, oh my gosh, this child is defiant, and this child has, no behavior and is just so angry. Well, guess what? We're seeing behaviors, but beneath those behaviors, is a world of emotions. And that's why we are talking about creating space for them to express. So when a child doesn't have that space to express all the shifts that I just mentioned that's taking place just from a parental relationship falling apart, it shows up in their behaviors. Some of them withdraw and, they become what we say emotionally unavailable, but it's only because they're having all of this emotional confusion and this difficulty in understanding relationships, and then that morphs into lack of trust and lack of support and all these things that they experience in adulthood. So man, separation and divorce, it does a number on everyone within the family system, but especially our children. And that's why we shouldn't shield them from the conversations. We should encourage it so that you can, as best as possible, answer any questions that they may have to alleviate the confusion and stress they may be experiencing in that moment.
Have you ever read a book or watched a movie where the plot seems so clear? It seems so clear. You know who the villain is, you know who the hero is. It's clear. It's crystal clear. And then by the end of the movie, there's like this big plot twist. And you recognize, whoa, 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 whoa. The villain may not be that bad. And the hero is actually quite flawed.
Right.
I bring up that analogy or that question. I pose that question because oftentimes when I'm working with adults that have in childhood gone through some form of divorce or separation, they've expressed where one or both parents often feel compelled to win the child.
Mm-hmm.
And they then portray the other parent in a negative light, or they share certain text messages. You see what's your father say about my hair, or and they tell the child all these things that really should stay between the two of them. The relationship was between the two of them. But there's almost this sense of like, no, but I have to protect them from who that other parent is. They don't know how bad that person is. So I have to show them all of these things that are negative about their parents. I don't think parents understand how completely shattering that can be.
Yeah.
You may be right that you went through the most horrible, horrific relationship experience with this person. And your feelings, your emotions may honestly be very valid.
Mm-hmm.
But when you present that to a child that the two of you came together and made, you are shattering that child's whole world. And many times when that child eventually grows up, they can turn out to resent you.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, now they start to see that, wait. Mommy was telling me all these things about daddy, but now I'm getting to know daddy as an adult and as a person put by himself, detached from mom's experience. And he's not so bad to me. So we really have to be careful not to put our lens onto our children, especially when it comes to their parents. Now, if their parents are bad parents, you be there, you be there, you guide them, right? But always leave the channel open. In a protective way, yes, but leave the channel open. As they get older, they will see for themselves who this person is, and they will choose for themselves whether they want to entertain a relationship with this person or not. But when you close that channel, when you try to burn that channel because of your experiences, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And I see that happening a lot. And it's actually bringing me back to think about a situation where um, this is an adult client I was dealing with.
Yeah.
Because of the messiness in the separation divorce between the mom
They
and dad.
still, and that's what I'm saying. It's the adult clients that are
Yes.
able to tell
Yeah.
you, and they go right back
And they
to
go
that.
right back. And one of her pain was that her mom had muddied the waters so much regarding that she missed out on experiencing him as a father, because that triangulation that took place, she started to get warped into the issues that are relating to husband and wife.
Exactly. That's our next. Ooh,
Exactly.
tell your
Right?
mother this for me. Like, pass it. The child is the messenger.
Yeah.
Please
And she got
don't.
warped into it. And let's be real, there are some men and women, they could be crappy spouses, but good mothers and good fathers. But when, as spouses, you triangulate your children into those spousal disagreements, as you say, you put that lens on them, and now they start seeing their father through the lens of a husband. And I remember I had to tell the client, your father is not your husband. He is your father. So let's now look at what he does and how he functions as a father to help her restore that vision. And in that moment, she's like, wait a minute, he has actually been a bum dad. He's there for me and whatnot, but he's a crappy husband, right? And that's what
But
we
when you
have.
say bomb, you mean a positive, like a great
No, no,
dad.
no. Yeah, bum, like good,
Oh,
great.
oh, oh. Okay. I was like a bomb.
Oh, no, 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 like the bomb.com.
Okay.
I know we have to be so careful how we using terminologies because it can mean so many different things, right? But no, bomb as in like really good, right? And I think I shared that to say that this is why, all the reasons why, as parents, you have to be careful on how you involve them and what you triangulate them in, and understand that, your child is not, in some way your child can be an emotional support for you, right? But they should not be your primary emotional support when you are going through those
That's
seasons.
not their
Grab a
job.
friend, grab a therapist, right? Grab a pastor or a counselor or whomever.
Mhm.
Because I understand when anxiety rises, you want to triangulate. You want to bring someone in because you're looking for that validation, you're looking for that protection, you're looking for someone to be on your side. And I get it. But you shouldn't use your child as, that person to emotionally support you, because the resentment will build up. And as you rightfully said, Davriel, when they grow older and they realize and they understand and the light comes on what mom was doing or dad was doing, it builds up that resentment within them. And that's what you don't want. You want them to make an informed decision. You want them to assess and discern behaviors. And in that way, they are able to spot those red flags or even green flags, right, in relationships that they will form as they continue to grow older. So it's a careful walk. It's a careful walk because it can really impact them in negative ways, and then
For
they
their
don't trust
lifetime.
men or they don't trust women.
Yeah.
That's quite unhealthy.
Yeah, for their lifetime. We've been having such a great discussion. And I know we have to like start wrapping it up, but there's some key things I don't want you to leave without us covering. So one of them was just like how you spoke a little about it earlier, right? Which is that Caribbean dynamic, the style of parenting, and then adult children. So we've seen, and I actually wrote a news article in the Express about this, the millennial crisis, right?
Mhm.
Where more and more, let's be real, adulthood is not what was promised to us.
Yeah.
There aren't jobs waiting for us, right? Like it's not what we
Yeah.
imagined, right?
Mhm.
And so more and more we're seeing adult children returning home, going back home, living with their parents. What impact or what happens when you see an adult child going back into a household, living with their parents under the same roof, but we still have the same type of Caribbean parenting that we've been talking about? I want you to highlight that a bit.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a lot of grief that comes with that transition, or any transition in a whole, right, comes with grief. So that element of finding your freedom, finding yourself, finding your individualism, because we spoke so heavily about, our culture that is very, collective and inclusive, and, you're attached to your family name, right? You lose the independence, you lose the space, you lose all the freedom that you have. And moving back in a Caribbean parent home, it comes with a cost. Right? Now, unless just as how we evolve as children, our parents can evolve too. So in some instances, it could be better where, your parent now actually sees you as an adult under their roof and not as a child under their roof, and maybe the dynamics can look differently. However, in the Caribbean, adult moving back into your parents, you're under your parents' roof, you have to abide by their rules. So if that means you can't come in this house after midnight, that's a whole change. Whereas you are like, yeah, whatever time, 5 a.m., you're rolling inside, that is going to be a shift, that is going to be a change. And also, to just their belief systems, if you would have your belief systems would have evolved or would have changed over time, you are now in a space where you have to navigate space for both belief systems, because neither one is right or wrong. It may, in some instances, it may be healthier than others, but you now have to manage those two different approaches and belief systems and still show respect for it. And that could be really challenging, especially if you are still healing, right? Or you haven't yet reached that place where you have accepted or forgiven, right? Some of the things that would have happened to you in childhood. So it's a lot of giving, it's a lot of taking, but it's also a lot of grieving, right? And I guess for anyone who is navigating that change, I think one of the greatest strengths we have in the Caribbean is that we can go back home. I just want to say, right?
Wow. No, definitely. I love that. I love that perspective. I love that
We can go
perspective.
back home, because in the US, when you reach 18 years, or when you're 18 years old, you fend for yourself. I'm not saying that the parents are not going to welcome them back, but if they come back home, they have to pay rent. They have, like, there are restrictions.
Mm.
In the Caribbean, our parents might say, we expect you to contribute whatever you can, so you still get that grace. So there's still a lot to be grateful for, that I could still go back home to my parents if ever I'm in any struggle. But I also do know that simultaneously, it is a challenge, and it may feel like you're making a few steps backwards.
Mm.
But
I
like
was
I
going
was,
to ask that. Do you see
yeah.
any regression in the person that's going back home? Do you see them experiencing any regression?
So I'll answer that question with an analogy of the bow and arrow, right? Think about a bow and arrow. In order for the arrow to go forward, what do you have to do?
Pull it even further back?
You have to pull it backwards. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be no forward movement or momentum. It just means that sometimes we have to take a few steps back. Even when it is, you think about, persons who are doing long jumps, they always go back so that they can jump further. So moving back and shifting doesn't necessarily mean that you are digressing, but make sure you have a game plan, right? Don't just move back and not have, some sort of, goal in terms of what your next steps are. But that pullback could actually be exactly what you need to actually go further than you were when it is you had to go back into your parents' home. So it's all about perspective, right? And yeah, sometimes we find ourselves in those positions. I could say when I moved from the US back into Trinidad, I lived in my parents' home for a few months. And it did feel like I was digressing, because I had all this freedom. I didn't have all these rules and everything. But it was a great help in transitioning. I just had a plan. And I brought my parents into the plan. It wasn't like I don't want to live with you all because I don't like you. I love my parents, right? But it was more kind of like I've been living on my own for such a long time.
Mhm.
My end goal is to get back there at some point in time. And they were very helpful in the process, you know? So maybe going back, maybe a healing process between you and your family. Maybe you need that space, that time
Mhm.
to bond, you know? Because you
Yeah,
never know what could happen in that space. So don't knock it, but I understand that it will be tough and it will be a grieving process. Just make sure you have a plan.
I love how you're telling them, plan. Because
Yeah.
with a plan, you're
You
able to
feel
really
hopeful.
explore your expectations,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even your expectations of your parents, you're able to explore that. And also just recognizing that you are an adult, right?
Mm.
And so now, where as a child, you would not have been able to assert yourself, you would not have been able to advocate for yourself. Now you have to find a way to instill certain boundaries. And
Mm.
boundaries are healthy. I always tell people boundaries are healthy for any relationship, whether it's
Anyway.
a romantic relationship, a parent child relationship. Boundaries are necessary and they're healthy. And so expect the boat to rock a bit when
Mm.
you're making those changes, because it's new and it's change. But consistency, respect, those go a long way. And so, yes, definitely, I love how you're saying go into it with a plan, don't go in blindly. Circumstances happen where these are just how
Yeah.
we end up, how the dice is dealt, right? And we have to just bounce, be resilient,
Mm.
and pivot, do what change needs to be done.
Yeah.
So I love that you said plan it. And not to, and I like the bow and arrow analogy as well. See it as an opportunity to rebuild, an opportunity to heal, to grow, to launch forward.
Are you a millennial who has found it challenging to adjust to life? Do you want a practical guide to help you navigate this crucial phase of your journey? If so, Mindful Legacy has a workbook just for you. Originally priced at $25, we're offering you a 50% discount for following this podcast. Click the link in the description to download your guide now.
Um, we're coming down to the end, but before we do, I wanted to ask you, how can parents really balance what we've been speaking about in terms of traditional values and also just more modern styles of parenting, listening, being open? How can they balance them to foster healthy self esteem and development in their children? How do they find that balance?
I think the balance would start with reflection, because the goal is not to totally abandon everything that your parent did, because as we highlighted, there are some good things, so take some time and reflect what are some things that I loved about, my parents' parenting style or past parenting styles, and the things that probably didn't work and need some fine tuning, and use that approach to be like, okay, what do I now want to bring into my parenting style? Because I mentioned earlier, there is the aspect of overcorrecting where you go to the other extreme, and then that may not necessarily be a healthy environment for your child as well, because children need guardrails, they need protection, right?
Structure.
They need structure. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. They need structure. So the goal is just finding, like, sitting with the past and sitting with the present and figuring out how can I merge this to create an environment that is traditional but still modern, right? Don't lose your authority, because I know that sometimes parents feel like, oh, if it is I try to lose the discipline or find different ways to discipline other than beating the child, and I'm losing my authority. What is more important to you? Having a relationship with your child, or having, this authoritarian approach to your parenting style, right? And I also want to affirm that not because you are inculcating this atmosphere of expression, it means that you're losing authority. No, you are still at the top of the hierarchy. You are still parent, right? You are still their head and their leader. And you can assert that in gentler ways. You can assert that in more affirming ways without belittling, without criticizing. Find that middle ground approach. I also want to say connect before you correct.
Ooh,
Connect before you
well
correct.
said.
Connect with your child. And I know, Davriel, you would have spoken about the 15-minute approach. You know the saying, go big or go home? No, go small. 15
Yeah.
minutes, that's attainable, right? That might work with your schedule, but it's important to connect and build relationship with your child. Then you are able to have more influence over them. And that's something as a parent you don't want to lose. You don't want to lose influence over your child. So understand that connection is important, and also understand that your child is growing, especially if you have teenagers, they are emerging adults growing into adulthood, and they need a parent that is also growing. So how you parented this child at 6 is not the same approach you will take at 16, is not the same approach you will take when they are 18, 19, 20, going into young adulthood. So understand that as they are growing, you also too expose yourself so that you can grow as a parent. You can learn healthy strategies on how to parent children from adolescents to young adults, because it changes. But overall, just give them space to express, give them space to, share, teach them how to understand their emotions. And I would say to go on your individual journey as a parent to learn about your emotions, because when you are able to ground yourself, your child learns how to ground their self as well, because they feed off of their parents' energy and how it is they handle their emotions. So it's not just about teaching them, it's about teaching you too, how to show up as your best self, as a healthy version of yourself. And they will model that in return. So give yourself grace. But yeah, find that middle ground, find that balance. It's not about throwing away the old and coming all new. There are great things that our parents modeled, and we want to hold on to that. And there are new things that they need to learn, and we want to bring that in as well. So old and new, they can coexist.
Beautifully said. I'm going to actually read a quote for you, two quotes,
Okay.
and I'd like you to just tell me what comes to mind. And I want our listening audience as well to reflect on these quotes. And if they want to comment in the comment section what the quote brought up for them, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
It's two quotes from The Five People You Meet in Heaven.
Okay.
Parents rarely let go of their children, so children let go of them. They move on, they move away. The moments that used to define them, a mother's approval, a father's nod, are covered by moments of their own accomplishments. It is not until much later, as the skin sags and the heart weakens, that children understand. Their stories and all their accomplishments sit atop the stories of their mothers and fathers, stones upon stones, beneath the waters of their lives. What do you think?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think that that's very touching. And, it speaks into that element of stewardship. This is what really came to my mind, that when God blesses us with children, it's not to control them, it's to be a good steward, right? To pour into them that they can become the adults that we want them to be. And when it is you reach into that cycle of life, because life is a cycle, you live, there's all the in between, and then you die, or you grow old and then die. In that stage of growing old, guess what? Everything that you poured into that child and stir that child to become, they get to pour it right back into you and care for you. Like, it made me also think about my grandmom who just passed away, and just how my aunts, how they took such great care of her in her older age. And it was just that the same way that she cared for them, they also was able to pour that care right back into her. So yeah, life is about taking in and letting go. Parenthood is about, I should say, taking in and letting go, but it's all about just being a great steward of the children that God blesses you with.
The example you brought up with your grandmother, I really appreciate you sharing that because I know it's something deeply personal. And why I love the fact that you shared it is because it's so in keeping with our topic today, parenting in the Caribbean. And it
Yeah.
sounds like your grandmother did it in such a positive and graceful way because there is this expectation, right, of a lot of parents in the Caribbean that when I get old, you gotta take care of me, right? But again, it's from that place of fear, it's from that place of shame and guilt and manipulation. But when parenting is done in a graceful way and it's done in a loving way, children naturally, just
Absolutely.
naturally, want to take care and pour back, like you said, pour back into the
Mm-hmm.
ones that held their hands in the very beginning. So thank you
Yes.
for sharing that. I have one more quote from the same book.
Okay.
All parents damage their children. It cannot be helped. Youth, like pristine glass, absorbs the prints of its handlers. Some parents smudge, others crack. A few shatter childhoods completely into jagged pieces beyond repair. What do you
Mm.
think about this one?
What I think is that it speaks about the harsh reality that we are broken people and we wouldn't always do everything perfect, because if it is, we think about something that's broken, if it's mishandled, it can cut and, cause the shedding of blood. And sometimes that happens in parenting, where because of your brokenness, because of your unhealed trauma, right, it shows up in your parenting inadvertently, and it causes hurt and it causes harm. But the beautiful thing is that we are not beyond repair. And this is why, Gabrielle, you and I, we do what we do, right? Because we create the space to help people redeem themselves. But we do live in a broken world, unfortunately. And out of that comes chaos and, some behaviors that we regret, but we do not have to stay there. We can find healing. We can make amends for things that was said that in the heat of the emotions, or, heat of the argument. There's always room for forgiveness and redemption. So we are broken, and yes, sometimes we play a part in our struggle, but here we are, evolving and redeeming. So yeah, so that stood out to me as you were sharing.
Yeah. Um, I really like that passage, and it may sound really harsh, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just so important for us to recognize impact. I think that's the biggest thing when every time I read that passage, it just speaks to impact. Like it says, whether it's a smudge, whether it's a little crack, or whether it's shattered, we have the control over which one it will be. But the point is, you are impacting this child
Yeah.
in some respect. And that impact could be positive or it
Okay.
could be negative. But recognize your impact. And, you know, to be honest, when working with clients, I like to say that you may feel broken, but I don't really know if I would say you are broken. And I actually go back to the Japanese have an art form of when a piece of pottery is shattered, it gets broken for whatever reason. They filled these cracks with gold. And
Mm-hmm.
so this, what was once a simple bowl, now becomes a prized possession because it's been filled in with gold. And that goes back to what you were saying. Doing that healing process, going through that, what could be sometimes be a really difficult and challenging painful process to work on yourself. But going through that, and even pouring into your faith, pouring into how do I become healthy? How do I engage with others in a healthy way? And just that is the forming, adding in of the gold to make it a whole new piece. Because that person, that healed person, and we'll still make mistakes for sure. We'll still make mistakes. But that person who is able to be accountable, able to apologize to their kids, say, hey, I was wrong. I said this, but I was wrong. You are teaching that child to then be accountable themselves. And that is what's going to make the difference in our society and in our culture. So thank you so much, Jenna, for this insightful. I enjoyed this conversation so much. I don't even know. I don't know if
It's
you
like I
see
feel like
it,
we could
but
just continue talking, right?
right? I mean, it was so good, and I know that we're passionate about helping parents, and so I have a parenting workshop that helps parents learn, how to work on their communication with their children, understanding the different stages of development with children, forming those attachment styles. But I also know that you also do workshops and classes for parents. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell the listening audience what you have to share. And, we've spoken about so many things that I know that people would want to know, okay, I recognize I could belittle my child sometimes. I recognize I could be a bit critical. And to be honest, now that I think about it, that critical side of myself is my mom, right? Like I'm doing the same thing my mom did to me, and I don't want to do it anymore. So how do I change? How do I move forward?
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, awesome. Well, at this moment, I don't have any um program going on at the moment, but coming up really soon, I would love to host a workshop. Like it might be a half day workshop in person, right, for parents to come and to really just create that space for one, for them to go through their own process of healing because I believe parenting will become a little bit easier if you turn inwardly first and you
Definitely.
deal with those unhealed traumas and those experiences. And, it's like I started this like leaning into breaking toxic cycles or breaking cycles of generational traumas because I think that's where a lot of our healing in our family life is going to come
Correct.
from. Like it ends here, it ends with me, right? I am going to be the one that is going to take the brunt and go through the healing and confront all of those things, and that's essentially what the space that I want to create coming forth. So if persons follow me on social media, eventually they will hear, of those workshops and seminars. I will try to do some virtually as well because I know sometimes it's not just in the Caribbean. This could be parenting anywhere in the world, right? But we start with that inner healing and then we look outwardly in terms of, approaches, as you said, understanding, taking time to understand your child and how they grow and how they develop. And in that way, how I can better relate to them in a way that's helpful. And we don't stay in this constant fight and argument, on a day to day basis. Because I see a lot of times parents actually fighting versions of themselves and their child.
Woo! Look, we're gonna end up being here for a whole other hour. I'm gonna cut you. Guess what, guys? We're gonna put
This is nice.
all of Jenna's information in the description. You can find all of her social media information there. So be sure to follow her. She has amazing things coming up. You also be sure to follow me as well. We would also be having some, parenting workshops as well. And I doubt this will be the last time you see Jenna and I together. We
No,
have
this
so
is
much
just the
more to talk
beginning,
about.
girl. I'm already thinking we need to do a weekly something
Like
like
we have
let's
we have so much more
so
to talk about. Okay, so we'll be seeing each other again sometime soon. If you guys have any questions, comments, you just want to share your experience, your parents, whether being the parent or being the child in the situation and you want to share what your experience has been, feel free to share it in the comment section. Remember to be respectful. And if you have any questions, we'll be sure to respond to those questions when we see them as well. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jenna, again, for coming. And for all of you that have stuck with us throughout this entire episode, I know it was a lot of information, but a great discussion. Always remember to heal yourself. Always remember you can always grow, you can always evolve. And we'll be back here. The couch is yours. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me.